We often begin the sharing of sermons in this church with an embodied practice. If you'd like to take part in it, and you don't have to, you can just quietly meditate, but if you want to take part in it, I invite you to consider a part in your body that is changing. It could be the gray hairs creeping in, or the zit blooming on your face that you weren't able to cover this morning. Maybe you're starting to see some definition from when you've been lifting weights. Maybe today you stayed home because you know your walk is not stable, not steady, and you just wanted to feel safer today, so you are worshiping with us online. Perhaps that rash of poison ivy is dried up, leaving behind renewed skin. Maybe you are changing your mind. Where is a change right now in your body? Even from the start of this sermon to the end, our bodies will not be the same. Even as I speak, even as you breathe, cells in your body are dying and are being born. If you like, you may put a hand on some part of your body that is changing, or you can just imagine it. Breathe in, breathe out. Breathe in, breathe out. And give thanks to the God who allows us to change and to be changed. Give thanks that this is a God who can help us to bring about change in the world. Amen. Revelation could be described as a book that, as a folk saying goes, comes in like a lion and out like a lamb. That's what they say about the month of March, right? Now, I've always suspected that Southerners came up with that saying because if you live in New York City, you might have to wait until the end of April before you can start petting any lambs. And in Revelation, before you get to that vision of the new creation where there is no more suffering or death, you will have to get through some fierce beasts. Ultimately, Revelation does want to lead us toward a vision of a new creation where there is no more suffering or tears. And we get the sense that John the narrator has an awareness that something like that exists, and yet it feels just beyond his reach. Have you seen the Netflix series Stranger Things? Anyone? In that show, the youthful protagonists discover and they get stuck in a parallel universe which they call the Upside Down. It's characterized by darkness, rot, and violence. And it was vaguely created by maybe the military-industrial complex. In the Upside Down, they can still see aspects of the world they knew from the Upside Down, but it has been so subject to decay, and there are tendrils of weeds and monsters that reach out to grab hold of them. I wonder if the world in John's time, under the domination of the Roman Empire, felt to him kind of like the Upside Down. Did he feel the tendrils of empire constantly reaching to grab hold of him, his fellow followers of Jesus, and of anyone who did not have the privilege of free, able-bodied citizenship? I wonder if John could hear or see, touch, taste, or smell the contrasting samplings of the new creation God intends, but feared that fully living in it was just beyond his grasp. However, in Revelation 5, John glimpses a scroll. And on that scroll, it is written on the front and on the back, which tells us it had a lot of words. Perhaps it might hold a plan, a prophecy, a pathway to get out of this state of domination, of violence, of injustice, and despair that John and his fellow Christ followers find themselves in. We know the right came up with Project 2025, and it has wreaked havoc on our democracy and tightens the chains of those already on the margins. But what if we had access to something much better, a scroll that would offer the path forward for liberation, a scroll that came from Jesus Christ himself? Wouldn't it be nice if there were a scroll like that for us today? Can I get a witness from anyone who feels overwhelmed by the state of our country? Anyone whose heart is ripped apart by the stories of loved ones who see their sons, their mothers, their daughters deported? Anyone who feel like you are worried you will not be able to feed your family, you will not be able to care for your sick loved ones, or even have autonomy over your own body, over free speech, your fertility, your gender? Are there those of you whose good neighbors have been priced out of your building? Maybe you fear that you might be next. Are there those of you today who marched in the 1960s or even heard the Reverend Dr. Martin Luther King Jr. preach from this pulpit, who are now seeing the advances that were made in that time get stripped away in this time? Have you seen what Texas has planned? Is there anyone here who fears the tide will not change in their lifetime, in time for them to witness and say, praise God, there were some weeds, there were some monsters, some beasts trying to grab hold of us, but with God's grace, we made it through? If there are any of you like that worshiping today, then maybe you can understand why John wept bitterly when he saw that this scroll, which he suspected held the key to liberation for him and his people, had 7 seals on it, and no one on heaven or on earth could open it. This wasn't like the little diary my older sister kept that had a tiny key that she hid from me, but which I regretfully confess that I was able to pop open anyway with my determined hands at the bratty age of 7. This scroll was locked up. And John mourned. I began to weep bitterly because no one was found worthy to open the scroll or look into it. Is anyone worthy? As it turns out, one of the elders said to John, "Do not weep. See, the Lion of the tribe of Judah, the Root of David, has conquered so that he can open the scroll and its 7 seals." And this is a moment when we expect someone filled with power and might to appear. The celebrity that Reverend Charlene was asking about. Maybe LeBron James will walk in, calling upon the Lion of the tribe of Judah. The Root of David conjures up scrappy but successful biblical characters who bring about huge military defeat. This lion, the elders promise, has conquered. In Greek, the word nikao, conquer, is the basis for the swooshed shoe that dominates in marketing to athletes and a few teens I know, Nike. Some Roman emperors, such as Nero and later Commodus, depicted themselves as lions, as a way of asserting their masculinity and their might. If Jesus is coming clad as a lion, we are keyed up that he will embody the masculine power of having conquered. I read last week that a zoo in Denmark has informed the public that it is in search of live animals to feed to its lions so that they can have the experience of eating prey as they would in the wild. And they ask for anyone who has an elderly pet who may be near a natural death anyway to consider donating their pet to the zoo, where the pet will be given tranquilizers and then fed to the lions after it is euthanized. And their list of pets were all vegetarian, so you dog and cat lovers are off the hook, but they would take chickens, rabbits, hamsters, even small horses. You see, it takes a lot to satisfy a lion. It wants not just the meat, but to also sink its teeth into the prey, the skin, the fur, the bones, the organs. Now, if the lion is the Roman Empire, or any empire for that matter, it takes a lot to satisfy this predator. It requires the work of enslaved labor. It requires a class system where only the elite can be citizens. It requires a steady supply of the vulnerable to feed the powerful. But though the elders introduce the Lion of Judah, the one who appears is a lamb, wounded and standing as if it had been slaughtered. I must ask, how can a slaughtered lamb stand? Biblical scholar Len Huber calls this the genderqueer lamb, because although it is presented in the ideal masculine figure of the lion, which in the ancient Roman world meant a virile man, is instead passive and feminized. Now, is this the one who is worthy? More importantly, can a Jesus who comes in like a lamb, where the emperor is a lion with its paw on the tail of a mouse, can one like this offer any kind of salvation to Christians in ancient Rome? Can a Jesus like that bring redemption to a nation that purposefully starves children when it destroys USAID emergency food rather than to send it to nations in need? Can a Jesus like that bring salvation to you, to me? Is this one worthy? Things are not always as they seem. Masculinity doesn't have to mean a mighty power. Victory, in the way the Spirit causes it, does not come like the swoosh of a basket, the capture of prey, the vanquishing of the enemy. Victory is when Jesus can look the suffering in the eye and say, I know. I have been there too. And I'm standing here with my wounds as a witness that though wounded, you will be transformed. You will become part of the new creation, even with your wounds You will rise. You must rise. In her class last month, Fissures of Hope, the novelist Ayanna Mathis turned me on to some teachings of James Baldwin regarding change from his 1962 essay, Down at the Cross, Letters from a Region in My Mind. Baldwin wrote, "For nothing is fixed forever and ever. It is not fixed. The earth is always shifting. The light is always changing. The sea does not cease to grind down rock. Generations do not cease to be born. And we are responsible to them because we are the only witnesses they have. The sea rises, the light fails, lovers cling to each other, and children cling to us. The moment we cease to hold each other, the moment we break faith with one another, the sea engulfs us and the light goes out." This writing comes from a pairing of Baldwin's essays in a book called The Fire Next Time. Baldwin draws in that title upon an old African-American spiritual. God gave Noah the rainbow sign, no more water, the fire next time. In other words, if we do not take up the responsibility to rise as the Spirit calls us, then the entire possibility of freedom disappears, as Baldwin said. While I was preparing this sermon last week, I was sitting with my teenage daughter. She was doing some of her own artwork, and we felt a rumble on the floor of the home, and we heard two loud booms. Together, my daughter and I realized that tectonic plates were shifting beneath our feet. That was the second earthquake I had felt in the month since we started preaching on Revelation. Did any of you feel either of those earthquakes? I was in New Jersey. I think they were stronger there. And I can give praise that we can get this flutter as a reminder that the earth is alive and changing, when that change doesn't present a catastrophe for me and my loved ones. But I know the earth is not always so kind to its inhabitants. Then again, how kind have we been to the earth? In Revelation, we hear every creature on earth and under earth and in the sea and all that is in them singing to the Lamb, blessing and honor and glory and might forever and ever. The whole creation, even that which is below, takes part in blessing the Lamb. They know who is worthy. And as much as we would love to have a scroll unsealed and unrolled with detailed, holy instructions on how to resist the changes we do not want to see, we have to recognize that change, both good and troubling, is inevitable. Tectonic plates will shift below the Earth's surface. They will also shift in global and national politics. They will shift even in our own bodies as they change. What we can do is look to the one who is worthy enough to open the seals. In his vulnerable, wounded body, he shows us that a transformation is possible that allows us not to undo the wounds caused to us, but to rise wounded though we may be, and ready to act in the ways that bring the new creation forward with the Spirit's urging. How can a slain lamb stand? After a 14-year-old son, Emmett, was lynched by a mob while he was spending a vacation with his relatives in Mississippi, his mother, Mamie Till Mobley, was encouraged by the authorities to quietly have her son buried near the site of the murder. She didn't do that. Instead, his mother brought him home to Chicago, and she held a public, open casket funeral so that the nation could see her boy's mutilated body, insisting, "Let the people see what they did to my boy." We took our daughter to the National Museum of African American History in Washington, D.C. a couple of years ago so that she could see the exhibit and hear that story. Mamie Till Mobley later wrote in her book, The Death of Innocence, "I want to keep making a difference. God told me, I've taken one from you, but I will give you thousands. We are only given a certain amount of time to do what we were sent here to do. You don't have to be around a long time to share the wisdom of a lifetime." This is how a slain lamb stands. Who is worthy? Only the Lamb is worthy. But this Lamb, whom the angels call a lion, can teach you something about power and vulnerability. Thinking back on our own bodies and how they are changing, we know that God is in change, both the wonderful and the fearful. And by the power of the one who is worthy, God helps us to become changers of the world. Accept your own vulnerability with compassion. That will help us to have the courage to hold the responsibility of what comes next. We don't have to be lions. May God seal us with 7 seals and make our lives, both the front sides and the back, witnesses to the change God is bringing in the world. May it be so.